Keep up with Scottish football with your host, John Turner.
So in this week's episode of the Low Ball Show, we have commentator, presenter, and for me, kind of the voice of football now. It doesn't really matter what game I go and watch. It always seems to be yourself that's talking in some capacities. Rory Hamilton. Rory, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, nice to be on. Thanks for the introduction. Very, very kind of you to to say all that. It still feels a little bit surreal to sort of have yourself in that position, but it's a very nice position to be in.
And I suppose just quickly, because and I'm sure you won't mind me saying, we had kind of scheduled where it was going to be last week, that we'd done the recording, you came on. Also, I appreciate the work that you do, and you'd got a phone call to then go and do a different game. I mean, how is that as well, though? Just, from going from one game to another and just having random phone calls, not knowing really where you're going.
I would say that now it's a lot more structured than probably what it has been in the past. I think since I started working at BT Sport, that was all really structured, and they would put in their picks for the games for, I think, like 3 months in advance, and I wasn't actually allowed to work for anyone else. So I had 50 games a season with them and couldn't work for anyone else. So I mean, that was absolutely bizarre to me, because I had been used to working for anyone and everyone and probably doing like 10 shifts a week. Sky Sports News would give you a ring on a Tuesday night to be at Aberdeen at 8 in the morning and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, your weeks, your days could change in an instant on a phone call. It doesn't really happen so much now at short notice, because I'm mainly Viaplay and TNT are really the two that I take all my work from, and those dates are generally in the schedule quite well in advance. So I can tend to plan my dates a little bit better than I used to. That one actually came up, I think, because Luton. So I did Burnley Luton last Friday night, and Luton ended up drawing their FA Cup game with Bolton, so I had to play their replay. It might actually be tonight, on the Tuesday. So they therefore had to move their Premier League game back from the Monday to the Friday to get it played. So that was why that came up. And I think, given that TNT had a few games over the weekend, they maybe got down the list until they got to me, and I got the opportunity to do one.
And how is it though, with something like that, to then kind of go and do that, maybe with teams that aren't as, well, now, because obviously we can be very aware of when you've got your kind of bigger, your Man Cities, your Liverpools, who are kind of constantly, in the media and the press and on the telly. How is it to then go to games like that? Is there a lot of research and things that you have to do going into that?
There's an awful lot. Yeah, I think and it's probably something that, as I do a few more games down in England, I probably need to naturally be across it a little bit more. I mean, if it was Scotland and somebody said to me at 2:00 on a Saturday, "Oh, can you do, Celtic against Aberdeen?" I wouldn't want to, particularly because I'd like to research it and get all my plan of action in place. But I could turn up and do it because I would know every single player at pretty much every single Scottish Premiership club. I'd be quite happy to turn up and do a 3:00 kickoff with no notice. For England, I mean, I do watch it. I'm across it, but yeah, I would say something like that. Burnley Luton is probably not two teams that you or I would tend to watch week in, week out and analyze as much as say I would with a Scottish team. So that requires extra work. And I would also say, during the game, probably the first 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe, you're still just getting everything comfortable in your mind of who's playing where, boot colours, haircuts, all that sort of thing become really helpful until your mind really engages and it becomes automatic. If the ball goes out on the right-hand side, right back for Rangers, I know it's Tavernier.
Yeah.
If it goes to the right back at Luton, there's a thought process, and for the first 20 minutes, you maybe need to look down at your notes, and then after that, it comes a little bit more natural.
So, do you find yourself, like, if you were, do you say in general, like non-work related, sitting watching a football game, would you find yourself now, especially when you kind of covering a lot of English games more, you watching that through different eyes, like through trying to pick things up and realize, kind of different trends that these players and clubs have, or do you still feel able to kind of chill out and just watch it as a fan?
I probably go through different spells with that. If I know that I'm doing a team, say it's a European game, uh, Celtic Atletico Madrid. I'll watch Atletico for as many weeks as I know that I'm doing that game. So it might be 3-4 weeks in advance. I'll watch them every week from an analytical point of view. But there will be other weeks when because I'm interested anyway. I'll have a Champions League game on. I'll pick the game that I want to watch, or I'll put on the goals show. And I would say this is how my footballing has watching has changed over the years. I used to watch everything. Wouldn't even get up to pour myself a beer because I would want to watch what was going on. I would be so intensely watching it. Whereas now I can chill out a little bit more. I can relax. I can have it a bit as background. And so I think I've maybe changed in that essence. If it's a game that I'm not, massively invested in, if it's a Scottish team in Europe, or a big league game or anything like that, then I'll be in place and watching it like you're kicking every ball. So yeah, it's changed over time, definitely. But I think I can probably play sort of both roles. It's really important to keep that enjoyment of the game, that it's not all just work. As much as it's a really I don't know if privileged is the right word. It's an amazing position to be in, to have the job that I have. But at the end of the day, it's still work, and I'm more than I used to have to tune out from football every now and again. So it's really important to remind yourself that you are a fan,
Yeah.
and how much you love the game, and it's not just your job. You're lucky that your passion is your job as well, but keeping that passion is really important.
And how is the kind of traveling aspect for that kind of growing now? Because obviously with you saying about doing more kind of covering across England, and even in Scotland, kind of traveling about that, is that something that you feel like you've kind of adapted to pretty well?
Yeah, it's that's a side of it that I really enjoy. I think going to different places, even the cities, and experiencing them. I love travel anyway. I love language. I love food. So going to different places to experience another city, and then on top of that, you go to, whether it's an iconic ground or just a different ground from what you're used to. I find that absolutely fascinating. For the first probably decade of working in the industry, maybe longer, my friends used to kind of say that to me, or you'd meet people and they say, oh, it must be amazing to get to travel to all these different places. I'm like, the furthest I would get to travel would be Dingwall, to go to Ross County. Whereas, once I started doing BT Sport, and that became TNT, and also with Viaplay, to get to go to away games, particularly with the European stuff, and then latterly with Scotland, uh, those for me are my favorite days in the job. They're absolutely brilliant. I love the travel. I love the cities. I love hearing different atmospheres. A game in Spain sounds different to a game in Italy, and a game in the north of Italy sounds different to a game in the south. Uh, I've been to Belgrade, which is a whole other level of atmosphere. St. Petersburg, all these kind of places produce these different noises, and and there's all sorts of different things in the kiosk. The fans have different rituals to turning up to the game, different chants, flares, all that kind of thing. That's what's so fascinating to me.
And just to kind of touch on the international side of it, I mean, obviously what Stevie Clarke and the team have achieved with Scotland has been phenomenal, but to be there, to be speaking to these people, to be soaking up the atmosphere, I mean, what was that like?
I mean, yeah, to touch on what Stevie Clarke has done, I think's phenomenal. It mirrors and goes beyond what he managed with Kilmarnock. I think there's a very similar feel to it, a club atmosphere. The players undoubtedly have completely bought into it. They love being in camp. There's a really good feeling amongst the squad, and to have been a part of that in this campaign. For me, I've been a Scotland fan for decades. Been going to games, for 20 years, home and away, with a bunch of friends, and it then it sort of becomes a bit of a dilemma of whether you want to commentate or you want to continue doing those amazing trips with friends, which I absolutely love. But to be able to hold the microphone for those games and for the team to have done so well is something really special. A real highlight of my career, and yeah, you're right to say to be in amongst it. And okay, I'm up on the gantry, but at the end of the game, I always go down and I'll hover about the studio, and so Steve will always come over and say hello and have a brief chat about how things have gone. And when it's good, then things are great. And a lot of the players are very good as well. And I'd have loved them to have qualified in Seville when I don't think I'm over that McTominay goal yet. But, I remember seeing John McGinn, and he was just going into the mix zone to do the interviews, and he came over and he said, what happened? Why was that not a goal? And then, I sort of explained it all. But to be honest, I really don't know why that's not a goal. And
yeah,
he's a really good character, very down to earth, and I think that the whole group has got that. So hopefully they can take that into the summer and do something historical for the country.
And I mean, at these games, and obviously, you're saying I'm now having a microphone in your hand a lot, instead of enjoying that with friends. I'm assuming the celebrations aren't dubbed down for you.
Do you mean the post-match celebrations or the in-game celebrations?
I suppose both.
Yeah, I mean, you probably can't you can't quite lose yourself as much as I would have done beforehand, because you do need to keep a level of composure. I think sometimes it maybe bubbles a little bit closer to the line than maybe it should be. If you take Oslo, I think was just, it was an extraordinary experience. I'd been there back in, I think it was it 2008 or something. We lost 4-0, and just a really terrible Scotland performance when we were never in the game. And so I was often thinking back to that, and to see then where we are and the result that we managed to get in a game that didn't really offer very much, but for those 106 seconds or whatever it was between the two goals, it was that, for all the time that I've followed Scotland, that moment has to be up there. And sometimes when a moment means so much to you, you can't help but lose yourself a little bit. I guess you've got to keep a degree of professionalism about it. But I've also got Michael alongside me in the gantry, and he's just excited as me. He could see it coming before I could. He knew when McTominay had it, and I think he says, "Oh, McGinn's in," and he's nudging me as well. He's like, "This is actually on here," and for them to execute it, it was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, the celebrations probably not quite the same as if I was in the stand. I mean, I remember being in Paris when McFadden stuck it in from 35, 40 yards, and I ended up something like 6 or 7 rows in front of where I started. So I don't think I can quite pull that off with a microphone and headset and wearing a headset. So it's slightly different, but we still managed to enjoy ourselves, definitely.
I mean, doing that from the gantry, I'm assuming, would definitely change the headlines the next morning.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely.
And to kind of touch on the kind of domestic football, kind of more so in Scotland, you know, you've done a lot of travelling about. I know you were saying this weekend you're covering Dumbarton and Rangers in the Cup. And how, in regards to the kind of lower league football, is that something that you kind of had to do a bit of research on? Is it something that you've kind of been covering on and off?
No, it definitely requires more research to cover teams that you're maybe not watching week in, week out. So this weekend, Dumbarton Rangers, Celtic Buckie Thistle. So you know, there's a team that don't really get any mainstream coverage. So
Yeah.
you know, a few phone calls to people at the club to try and get some extra information that maybe isn't quite out there in the public domain quite so much, because that really is the job, to tell the stories at whatever level that is, and create a narrative for the viewer to enjoy. And sometimes it's a nod to a club or a person that's putting in extra hard work that you know, maybe people don't know about. And I think that's always a nice thing to be able to do. And I think also, you know, when I talk about some of the places that I've been, and you know, you get to go to Atletico Madrid and Lazio, Betis this season. You're going to these fantastic stadiums, but you know, we mustn't forget what we have here, and a lot of the characters and the stories that go with some of the lower league grounds, and the atmospheres that you can get at them are unique as well. And we've got a really special product, I think, in Scotland at all levels. There's a passion for football that is different from other countries, and it's something that we should really hold high, because I think football in Scotland's absolutely magic.
Yeah. And just to kind of touch on that, I mean, firstly, I will say, with you talking about being at grounds with atmospheres of flares and things, I was at Caledonian Braves against Albion Rovers at the weekend. It was delayed in the kickoff, only by a couple of minutes, because of flares going off. Completely different, considering it was, I think, 6 or 7 people under the age of 12 that were so happy. And I mean, the one thing I'll say is, and it was actually a reasonably good crowd for that level, but the kind of group of kids that were there sang for the entirety of the time. And you know, it's when you kind of look at that and kind of traveling about, I mean, do you support, granted in different volumes in regards to numbers, but it's there at kind of every level and every club throughout?
Do you know what? I think that brings up a really good point, because I think often when you see groups like that, people can almost try to make fun of them, because they're maybe supporting a smaller team, and you know, they're putting in their time to support that. And it's so easy for kids to be absorbed by the Premier League, by Real Madrid, by Barcelona, because all that sort of thing is so heavily marketed. It's thrown down your throat. If I look at my nephews, for example, you know, they all talk about the Premier League, and but I'm like, no, learn what's on your doorstep. And I think when you see youngsters out at their local club, they're there because they've got a local pride, and they can actually get to see things up close.
Yeah,
Whereas the super clubs they're miles away. It's you can't really experience it. It's too easy, I feel, to support those teams. So actually, I should give my nephews credit because they're still decked out and follow regularly AFC Wimbledon, which is their dad's team. So they support a lower league team as well. So I mustn't let them give them too much stick.
and and just to kind of just quickly touch on what you'd said. I mean, if you looked at the Caledonian Braves game that I'd went to, which is based just at Strathclyde, that was £5 to get in, and especially when you look around and you look at the the cost of living, the prices of things, doing that, £5 to go in and watch a game of football, which and I travel about quite a lot, is the cheapest I've found or seen across kind of a lot of different levels.
Well, and look, you're getting 90 minutes entertainment. I've always been a believer that quality doesn't guarantee entertainment. You can watch two of the best clubs in the world and it can be a dire game. Or you can watch a game at the bottom end of League Two and you can get an absolute cracker.
Yeah.
For me, it comes down to teams being well matched, especially, that and being motivated for a prize, and be that to move away from the relegation zone to go top of the league to win a cup. That's when you get really good quality entertainment. You don't need to have 11 players earning 250 grand a week to make a good game. Sometimes they produce some of the worst games that you've ever seen. Yeah. So for your 90 minutes entertainment for a fiver, I think you're doing quite well.
And I suppose, just in talking on that, in regards to entertainment and value, I mean, I'm assuming in the amount of games that you've covered, you must have came across a few games where you've sat, and not that I'm asking you to specifically name, but you've came across a few games and you've kind of sat and you've thought, do you know what, this maybe wasn't the game it was billed to be. Do you find that difficult, like to sit and then concentrate? Because obviously you're going to be speaking throughout, or speaking, kind of post-match and things. Do you find that tougher? Whereas I suppose as a regular, kind of general fan sitting in the stands, you can pick up your phone, you can, go to the pie stand, whatever it may be.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully they're forgettable, so I don't think I could even name them. The bad ones that you do. But you're right. I mean, they're the ones that test you. They're the hardest games to do when really nothing's happening, and I think that's when you really appreciate a good co-commentator. And I'm really lucky to work with, or have worked with, some of the absolute best in the business, from Ali McCoy's, Chris Sutton, Michael Stewart, Stephen Craig, and Robbie Savage the other night. These guys make your job easier, and particularly in moments like that. The easiest games almost to do are the big ones, the cup finals and the big internationals and the big European games, because there's so much at stake. You've got a crowd that drives it throughout. Even if it's 0-0 in a Champions League game at Celtic Park with 15 minutes to go, that probably means that the noise gets turned up, because suddenly, the stakes are even higher. There's more jeopardy in the next big moment. So those games, they almost do the job for you. But if you get a half full stadium with two teams, end of the season, mid-table, when they're not playing for much, that's when it really tests you. But you've got to always remember that it's not about whether you're entertained, because there are people at home sitting watching and praying for it to go their way, for that moment to pop up. And if you can't hit their level of excitement, or deliver something that appeases what they want to hear, then you're not doing your job. So you've got to put yourself in other people's shoes and realize how much it matters to them.
Yeah, and and just in you saying that as well, do you ever feel sometimes like you're the entertainment in some eyes? If the game was, can be pretty lackluster, or we've always seen the games that are very stop start, for one reason or another. Do you find that that's where the relationship, you say, like yourself and your co-commentator, really kind of comes to light to then kind of fill these voids?
Yeah. I mean, I would never say that I'm the entertainment. Almost you want to be a bit like a referee, and a good referee you don't notice. But of course, there are going to be spells in games when really you're desperately willing for something to happen, and you're right. That's when you use these guys, and they really earn their keep. And they'll know when you're struggling a little bit. The number of times when if you've done the back four and listed them off, and then suddenly they go back the other way, and then it passes to the right again, and you're like, oh, I can't say his name again. It's just, so that's when these guys come in, and they might have a story, they might have some sort of tactical insight to hope that you get through these. It might almost be 30 seconds that you need to maybe just gather your thoughts of something else to say.
Yeah, and kind of look at it as well as to what you've done. I mean, I suppose one of the questions I'd have for you, and I say minus the kind of Scotland runs kind of at club level, where's your kind of biggest in a game that you've covered, your kind of wow moment been, whether it's been like a goal or a result that's kind of shocked you?
That's a good question. I don't think I do a lot of these podcasts, and I don't think that I've had that before. That's very good. I think any big moment still shocks you, and if it doesn't, then maybe, or it still excites you, and it would be interesting to wear a heart monitor for me during a game, and you'd be able to see where the goals are, because it doesn't matter who it is, you get excited because that's what the broadcast is about, and because it's created a moment that you have to come to your peak. That's my boss at Sunset and Vine, Grant Phillips, was the sort of main man with BT Sport, and he always said, you've got 90 minutes to talk, get your big moments right, and if you get them right, the rest, it's not that it doesn't matter, but you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But you come into your own in those big moments. So if I'm trying to pick out, individual ones. I think I'd probably try and stick to European games. I think just because there's a different atmosphere about
Yeah.
European games. They're at night. You'll know it from being at big grounds and big atmospheres. There's something different, be it a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night. And so I think the ones that stick out for me, I would say with Celtic, Christopher Julian against Lazio, and Cal McGregor against Zenit St. Petersburg. That was my first European game for BT Sport, and it's a magnificent goal as well. For Rangers, their entire run to Seville was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's a bit fresher in the mind as well. The semi-final against Leipzig I think there was a special atmosphere at Ibrox that night. Something different really to what I'd ever heard, and the final itself. So those are probably games and the individual moments within those that probably stick out the most. There will be more. I probably need to think about. The obvious one. I know you asked for club, but internationally, and we've spoken about it already. But Kenny McLean's in Oslo is one of those where, and you can tell in my commentary because it's far from textbook. I'm creating my show reel at the moment, and I don't know if I'll include it because I might just go too far with it. But there's an example. So you're asking for a moment that shocks you, and to be shocked, you have to be taken out with your comfort zone.
Yeah,
and that's one that does. That's pure emotion when I it's whatever words the messages go from the brain to the mouth, and something was said.
and I suppose in talking about the type of moments, kind of next, if you're going in kind of post match to speak to whether it be player, manager, and they've had kind of a bad result, a disappointing result, do you find that difficult to then kind of try and get that interview from them?
Yeah, and being a reporter is a very different skill in itself. So that would be where I would quite like, in an ideal world, you want that second half to think of what you want to ask, and probably more importantly how you want to phrase it, because I think a lot of getting something out of someone comes down to how you phrase the question and how respectfully you you ask it. A lot of the time they don't want to say it. They might have something, and do you know what? A lot of the time, the easiest question is just to say, what do you think of the game? And that's when they'll deliver to you what they want to talk about. They might have a gripe about a decision, about a player doing something that maybe they shouldn't have. That's when they get the choice. And if they don't then provide you with maybe what you want them to talk about, that's when you can go into specifics.
Yeah.
But they can't. Those can be difficult. Sometimes they don't want to talk to you, and that's when having a relationship or knowing someone that they know that you have a job to do, that they have a job to do, and somewhere you've got to meet in the middle. So that's why it's difficult for people that don't have experience to do that, because maybe you turn up and you don't know a manager, and so they're not so sure how to take you. You build up trust over time, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can get certainly some frosty atmospheres down in the interview room.
I suppose that's kind of, and again, without getting into kind of wins, but having kind of experiences like that, do you take that then as a kind of learning curve? Does it make you come away and think, maybe I should try a different approach next time? Or do you simply put it down to, do you know what, for example, the team had a bad game, it wasn't a performance that was expected to happen, and you kind of put it down to, for that team specifically, it was perhaps a bad day at the office and they weren't firing all cylinders?
Yeah, I mean, I think you learn from all those experiences, and how to approach difficult situations. But at the same time, you never quite know exactly how somebody at the other side of the microphone is going to react. Sometimes it can be completely irrational. Those guys have got so much pressure on them. But if you feel that you're asking a question that needs to be asked and you ask it in the right manner, you can still sometimes get an ugly response, and that's not your fault. That's the position that you're put in, and that's what you just have to put it down to. These guys are under immense pressure. If a result hasn't gone their way, then yeah, you might get a nasty snap. But you've just got to be kind of ready to roll with that punch, and and deliver something else, because sometimes a short, sharp answer can catch you out if you've not got a follow up, or that you want to try and press a little bit further because you think you can maybe get something out of them. Sometimes it takes 2 goes, and then you've really got a risk a third if you've not quite got it, and it could be interview over at that stage. But these, I think, in the light of day, I think all the managers they don't want to give you a hard time, but it's the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's filled with pressure, and but at the end of the day, everyone's there to do a job as well.
Yeah.
So it's part of it. It's just part of it. You get some good days and bad days at that job.
And I suppose, without naming any names of that, has there ever been a question, whether it's been somebody else within a kind of press conference situation, or about that you've heard ask a question to somebody and you've kind of thought, why did you ask that?
Many. yeah, many. I certainly wouldn't go into names, but when you notice somebody else getting the stare, you're just like, oh, I'm so glad that's not me. Because you know what, sometimes you arrive at a press conference or at an interview, and an editor or a producer will have asked you to specifically ask a question. I've been in some interviews where I have been specifically asked to ask a question, and I know it's not going to get a good response, and I don't want to ask it. But if I don't, then I'm not going to get asked to work for them again. So it can put you in a difficult situation.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that. That's why I quite like sticking to commentary.
And then just were you talking about the kind of pressured environment and things. I mean, kind of recently, Lee Bullen was let go from air, which I suppose in part, understandable based in the season's results, but when you look at last season compared to this season, it just shows you how quickly that environment can come, from all the highs of finishing second. I think at one point in the last day of the season, there was all the chops and changes with they're going up now, to where it's resulted in them being this season, and then subsequently, Lee losing his job.
Yeah, it's they'll all tell you it's the nature of the business, and you can't rest on successes for long. I think football clubs in the main are, whether it's a modern thing, I think probably. I think they're a little bit quick to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
I often think, say things have gone very well, and then 6 months later aren't going quite so well. I often think that you need to put yourself in a position and say, and this isn't relating to Ayr United because I don't know the ins and outs there, but are you going to be better placed in a year's time by making a change? So say you take it at a higher level and you go, right, you've got to sack a manager, pay him off and all his staff. You're then going to have to possibly pay compensation for a new guy coming in and all his staff, who's then going to look at the squad and say, no, I'm not sure about this squad, want to maybe get 5 or 6 out the door to then get 5, 6 in the next window. So you're almost getting an overhaul of a squad. Are you going to be better 12 months down the line than you are right now? Rather than maybe, because fans are they're playing the emotional side of the game, and they want success then and there, and they don't like seeing a rival doing better than them, and they think, which they've got absolutely every right to think, we need to change this now because we need to win next week or else we're in real trouble. and that's, you know, that's why boards will take longer than that. But I still think that there is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction because the pressure comes, I think, more from supporters now than it used to.
Yeah. And you know what? I do agree with that. You know, there was a conversation. Again, this isn't just specifically related to it because it was a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago that, you know, I just feel when you looked at the statistics in Scotland with managers who have started the season, who have since been let go, and this is from going from the kind of, you know, the lowland leagues right up, the percentage was incredible to think, you know, 6 months in, ultimately, to a season. And I agree in some cases a change perhaps has to be made, but as often as it does get made now and as quickly as it does, I definitely think it is a kind of frightening prospect to be a manager.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, look at somebody like Callum Davidson. Great to see him back in work now, but did, in my opinion, the best achievement in Scottish domestic football history.
Yeah.
With that St Johnstone team to win a cup double is absolutely phenomenal. You know, not done since the 80s, and in the modern day environment where two clubs have got such a financial advantage over everyone else, and then for things not to go so well, and eventually that should almost be you've got the job for for life.
Yeah, your
But such is
golden
the nature
contract.
of football is well that can't exist, and you know eventually ends up without a job, and you know, like I say, it's great to see him back in, but it just shows that and he wouldn't have been resting on those successes, but that it doesn't actually hold you on for very long and buy you all that much extra time, which can be a shame in some ways. Sometimes a squad and a club need to move on from something.
Yeah. And, you know, just to kind of, and I really do appreciate your time today. The last couple of questions, not all so much footballing related, but just a couple of quick questions that I thought would be nice to end us off. So the first one being, what was your favourite TV series?
Do you know what? So my favorite movie is called City of God. It's a Brazilian film, and there was a spin-off series of that, which I'm gonna guess not one of your viewers has seen, but it was called City of Men, and it was absolutely brilliant. They used all the same local actors who were all kids in the favelas in Rio, and it's a fantastic series. It's actually really hard to get a hold of now, so I'd put that up there. More modern, I think recently. You've asked for one, but I'm going to give you a few. Succession is outstanding, mainly for Brian Cox and his put downs, and The Bear. I think I've watched in the last year or so is really good. Maybe go back a bit further, like Band of Brothers. So there's 4, which is it's far too many, but I can't pick one.
And your favourite type of food?
Oh, how long have we got left? Because I could go on for a long time here.
We really should have just
I
made this
mean,
a food show now.
I mean, we absolutely could have. Favorite type of food. So I went over to Japan for the Rugby World Cup in 2019, and I would put Japanese cuisine right up there. It is outstanding. I would also, in the summer, we went to Sicily. I love Italian food, and my main worry of going to Sicily is that I might have ruined Italian food because Sicilian is even better. It is absolutely unreal how good the food is out there. So Sicilian, Japanese. I love cooking myself. Be it like barbecue. I've got a pizza oven that I just got in the last few months, so I'm enjoying that. Curries. I do a good goat curry is probably my speciality that I learned when I was I did a year in Guyana teaching, so their sort of main staple meat was goat, and yeah, I do a mean Caribbean goat curry.
The next one that I've got for you is your favourite stadium that you've visited.
I really enjoyed the Maracana in Belgrade. I've not been to the one in Brazil, unfortunately. But that was all about atmosphere. It's an old bowl, and the noise inside that place is like something you've never heard before. Another, seeing as we're not in a specifically football part of the chat, Yokohama for Japan Scotland in the Rugby World Cup again was an atmosphere that the Japanese crowd, full of families, which maybe don't always produce the best atmospheres here. Somehow over there, 85,000 odds inside that ground was. I'll always remember that one. Those are probably two that stick out. But I love going to different stadiums. I love the open air ones that you get in Spain, and Southern Europe, that are also, been to all three in Seville, but Betis for me stands out as a really good one. I was lucky enough to go to Atletico Madrid's new ground as something else. That is really, really impressive. So there's a few. We've got some good ones in Scotland as well.
Yeah, a few not too bad ones. The next quick one for you would be your favourite player that you've ever got to see, whether that be as a fan in the stands, whether it be on the telly, whatever it may be.
So my favourite player growing up was Gabriel Batistuta, but I never got to see him play. So probably Paolo Maldini or Ronaldinho. I think Maldini, maybe he's not got that spectacular attribute that Ronaldinho had.
Yeah.
But just, I think probably from growing up and Football Italia was on, and that was the first foreign football that you could see in that Milan team, and he was there for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And just such a solid competitor. So yeah, I would put him in, and Ronaldinho just because he was just unbelievable. I would imagine having the skills that he had and how much fun he had playing football. And I think particularly now in the game's so structured, you still get the odd gem like a Lionel Messi, but Ronaldinho you have to build an entire team around him, and because he's just so unique. He was fabulous to watch.
And the final question would be, if there was to be a film made about your life, who would you choose to play you?
Well, it's got to be a Scotsman with a good voice. I don't know. Martin Compston's probably quite an easy one to take. He's from across the water from me. I grew up in Helensburgh, so he's from not too far away from me.
I genuinely do predict before I ask that question, before I come on, what the answer is going to be, and yours is the first I've had right. And all these that I've done.
Does that mean I've picked far too obvious an option?
Or I think it means that we've both picked correctly there.
Maybe that's true. And do you know I really like at the moment? Barry Kinahan. I think he's an outstanding actor, but I don't know. I don't have a strong Scottish accent, but I wonder if his Irish accent could cover across to mine.
And just finally, and I really do appreciate your time today. We had touched on international football at the beginning. Obviously, we know we're going to be heading to Germany. What's your kind of view on how Scotland potentially could do there?
I think we've got to go in with confidence. I don't think we should have any of this older mentality that's probably been in other squads of I don't want to say it, but glorious failures is a banned phrase to me. I hate it. I think it's absolute nonsense. I think we absolutely should believe that we deserve to be a part of it and a part of the conversation about the tournament, because I think we've shown on our day that we can beat very, very good sides. And I think, we look at it from our point of view, and, opening game against Germany, I don't think we should have any fear of that, because I think if you look at it from a German side, they'll be looking at Scotland and saying, oh, this isn't as straightforward as we'd have liked. A team under pressure, opening night in Munich, a side that's beaten Spain, and, well, it'll be just over 12 months by then, that's beaten Norway. I think we've got a great chance of getting out the group and making history for the first time. I think that's exactly the mentality of the squad and Steve Clarke, that they're going not to just be a part of it, but to take part and compete. And they won't be thinking our aim is the last 16. They'll be thinking get to the last 16 and then where can we go? Because they have that ability. There's a togetherness about the squad. There's a steely mentality that's, I think, ditched that older mentality that has been within squads of glorious failure, maybe, feeling too small, not good enough to be a part of it. We easily are. But that said, we've got 3 games which are all tough. Every team that's there deserves to be there, and they'll all be looking at each game and thinking they can win it. Every game is winnable. We've shown that. If you can beat Spain, then, and comfortably, by the way, then there's no reason why you can't turn over Germany on their own patch on the opening night. There's no reason why you can't beat Switzerland, Hungary, and put yourselves in an amazing position. And then when it comes to knockouts, okay, it's new territory for us, but that weight of history, I don't think's on these players. I think they've got a bit more of a modern, positive mentality, and so knockouts at least. But yeah, I'm not going to say we're going to win it, but I think that we can make a big impression.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of quickly, I think the way the team's been playing and who we've got. I mean, you look at John McGinn and look at where Aston Villa are sitting. Scott McTominay, and look at the size of Man United and what they've done. And it's now more when you start to look at teams that are performing well, not just in Scotland and players from clubs around here, but also across the border as well. And we're starting to see, having kind of players that are making big impacts in these sides and in that league. I think it's probably helping for the experience of carrying through these games.
Yeah, players at big clubs, it sets a standard. If you're playing for Manchester United, for Liverpool, Aston Villa, Celtic, Rangers, then the demands that are on you, they're putting together squads where, okay, the English teams, there's more money. So if you're at Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp thinks, right, where's a weakness in our team, because we can go out and get the best in that position in the world. So he's got Andy Robertson, and that's, he's been there for a long time, and they've never looked to change that position. Scott McTominay's had to fight, but he's shown. I think Steve Clarke shown them how to use him as well. And he's had to fight and get his position and win the fans over, and get in that team. And I think the other one that you pick out, John McGinn, went with no expectation to Aston Villa, 2 point something million, and I think when you spend big money on a player, managers will probably give them more time because they're hanging their hat on that guy. It's probably harder to leave out a £40 million Brazilian than a £2.5 million Scotsman. But
Yeah.
John McGinn, throughout that entire time, has been a mainstay of that team, been made captain. That the management has changed, a good number of times at Aston Villa, and he's still the main man in the middle of that midfield, even though they could go out and splash 40, 50 million pounds on a player to come and play that position. They're like, well, no, because we've already got one.
Yeah. And just on that, I'd just like to thank you, Rory, honestly, for your time and coming on.
Good, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed that, John.
Thank you. Cheers, mate.